You're listening to Storytime on channel15radio.com. Old time radio for a new era. Thank you for joining us. In this series, we feature Terry Morgan reading from her work, The Ambassador, a fun, family-friendly sci-fi martial arts adventure. The Ambassador is an accomplished older woman who brings together a tight-knit team to protect the local neighborhood. Together, they must find a way to stop the invading Olmeri. Previously, the Ambassador revealed their mission to her team and Captain Alexander Logan. In this episode, the Doctor discovers Beth has a secret even she doesn't know and finds a way to win the trust of their soon-to-be new friends on Kaylin. This episode begins Chapter 2 in the story. It reveals more of the lore, and the characters reveal much more about who they are. Most of the story is told through dialogue and the actions of the characters. Chapter 1 was about introductions. Step by step, I introduced the lore of their universe, the background for the story, and the first 15 featured characters. In Chapter 2, I let them speak for themselves. It took some time for me to find their voices and to distinguish each one. At first, the narrator was telling the story. It was the story I wanted, but it was boring. I needed to find a way to stop telling the story and start showing the story. Don't tell me, show me, was something one of my college writing professors insisted on. As a writer, I needed to find a way to let the reader see what I wanted to show. How to do that? Scenes and dialogue? Where are we? Who is in the room? What is going on? What did they say? What did they do? I wanted the characters to tell the story themselves. To get them to do that, I had to get to know them really, really well. I needed to know where they came from, how they grew up, what they liked and didn't like, how they related to others, and so much more. As I kept working on this story, I realized I needed to keep track of what was going on with the characters, the developments in the story, and what had been revealed. So I developed a story Bible with outlines for the story, profiles and images to represent the characters, and a matrix that showed the basis for their relationships. The character images made it easier for me to set up the conversations. The profiles gave me references and continuity too. They gave me the insights I needed for dialogue. The way the characters speak is natural. I did not try to put a lot of exposition into the dialogue. What the characters say, who talks about what, how they interact, their tone, and even who they speak with is natural. It also reveals their connections and relationships. This episode begins with the Doctor having spent all night working in his lab. He discovers what may solve a pervasive medical problem for the people of Kaylin. He knows his discovery could change everything. He goes to tell the Ambassador. The Doctor is playful and charismatic. He is also highly gifted and more than a little persistent when he's working on something. He refuses to quit. The Ambassador has had to tell him more than once to rest. I use the contrast between the outward appearance and the true nature of the characters throughout the stories. It's one of the underlying themes. It's part of the lore in the stories and the teachings in traditional martial arts. The traditional martial arts teach that we need to look beyond appearances to see what is real. The outer appearance may be deceptive. It may not be what is real. The idea of letting go of illusions so that we can see the true form appears in multiple teachings. In martial applications, deception may be a fake by a fighter to draw the opponent off balance. In ordinary life, it may be the way someone is dressed. I use that idea in the stories too. The way people dress turns out to be a key element in Olmeri society. What they wear is something I use to define all the characters. The Ambassador wears her formal robes to go meet the High Council and on a few other occasions, but she wears simple clothes most of the time. She's not pretentious unless she decides to be. The idea that what we wear, what we show to others, is not necessarily who we are is important for the stories and for character development in real life. The skills to distinguish what is a pretense of appearances from what is true nature and what is an illusion from what is real are fundamental to developing skills in the traditional martial arts. The characters in the stories must learn these skills too. I'll be right back. Now, Chapter 2, from the Ambassador. A dinner party. Preparations. Part 1. Each portion in good measure, each time into its own. There is more here than is apparent. Look beyond what you know. Coffee with breakfast. The ambassador's quarters on the Magellan. The ambassador was standing next to the coffee maker she had set up in her quarters on the Magellan. She had gotten up early to review the treaty documents. She'd put on a pot of coffee and a flute concerto. The smell of fresh coffee and the sound of a happy flute filled the room. It's the little things, always the little things, she thought as she poured a cup and walked over to the window. She blew across the top and took a sip. No matter where she was or what she needed to do, she liked having a few of the little things. They kept her grounded. Familiar music, the sound of birds in the morning, the stars, and, well, if she was going to be honest, she had to admit she really liked having her coffee in the morning. She went over to her desk, sat down, and picked up a large handheld screen. The door chime sounded. "Come in," the ambassador said. She didn't look up from the screen. "Good morning," the doctor said. He sniffed the air. "What's that? Can it be fresh coffee?" he asked. The ambassador looked up and smiled. "Help yourself, doctor. You are always welcome and you know it. You're up early," she said. "I've gotten used to being up early. We've been working some pretty long hours these past few weeks," the doctor said. "And you are supposed to be resting today? We'll arrive at the Kalen system tomorrow. We need to rest now," the ambassador said. The doctor held the cup under his nose, inhaled, took a sip, and smiled. "I know," he said. "Well, then, what are you doing here?" the ambassador asked. "Coffee?" the doctor asked, grinning. "I've been conditioned," he said. The ambassador laughed. The doctor walked over to the bench along the window. A few small cases and one long one were pushed off to the end. "Are you still unpacking?" he asked. The ambassador nodded. "I brought a few things from the shuttle," she said. "So I see. Is that long case what I think it is?" the doctor asked. He opened the case. A long sword in a polished redwood sheath was set on top of a neatly folded set of red and gold formal robes. The hilt was polished mithril. The sheath was inlaid with mother of pearl. The pommel was trimmed with three-color gold that began to glimmer with red, gold, and green lights. The doctor turned to face the ambassador, his eyes wide. "You brought Aladrel? Are you expecting something?" he asked. The ambassador shrugged her shoulders. "I don't know," she said. "So why?" the doctor asked. The ambassador smiled. "Because I don't know," she said. The doctor grinned. "You sound like Master Tai," he said. The doctor had also trained on Roz too. He was a keeper of water 3 generations younger than the ambassador. He had been selected to join the House of Dwi, water, and had chosen to focus on developing healing skills rather than fighting skills. The ambassador bowed. "Why, thank you. More coffee?" she asked. She picked up the pot and offered to pour. The doctor held out his cup and smiled. "There is no substitute for brewed coffee. This is wonderful. How did you manage it?" he asked. The ambassador grinned like a Cheshire cat with a warm bowl of milk. "We're here partly on an agricultural trade mission, are we not? And coffee is an agricultural product, is it not?" she asked. The doctor laughed. "Why, yes. Yes, it is. And yes, we are." He put his cup down on the table, leaned forward, and grinned. You are really good at this, he said. The ambassador smiled bigger and nodded. Grapes are also an agricultural product, she said. The doctor laughed. Yes, yes, they are. We need to have more of those bottled Cabernet grapes. They went very well with my rice pilaf, he said. He grinned proudly. They both laughed. They had spent 3 hours fishing the wine bottles out of the rice bins. The ambassador turned her head slightly. Damani is really good at anticipating and being able to acquire what we need, she said. She was trying not to laugh. It wasn't working. She giggled. Would you like more? She asked. She reached for the coffee pot again. The doctor held out his cup again. Yes, please, he said. The ambassador poured. The doctor raised his cup. To Damani. He brought the cup just under his nose and took a deep breath. It's nice to have a few extras once in a while, he said. The ambassador smiled at him. Was coffee the only reason you stopped by, Mark? She asked. The doctor grinned. No, but it smelled so nice, he said. You're welcome to be here just for coffee. You know that, right? The ambassador asked. The doctor grinned. What time should I be here in the morning? He asked. The ambassador frowned, then chuckled. The doctor put his cup down and sat back a little. You're right. Coffee wasn't the only reason I stopped by. Beth seemed to think that the Cora would be very interested in learning how foods affect the body, using foods for their healing properties, and how they could use some of their native plants, trees, and shrubs. So I started looking at what they have and what they might need, he said. He leaned forward. Tell me again, what's your plan? He asked. The ambassador looked down with a puzzled frown. You know what I have planned, Mark. First, convince the Kalan Council to sign the treaty. I'm prepared to offer them a steady supply of seed grains and a few of the Alliance's newest automated harvesters, along with training on how to operate them. Whatever else has to come after. The biggest problem is that we need a way to gain their confidence, but we don't have much information. That makes it difficult for me to figure out what they might want the most and whether or not I can arrange it, she said. The doctor nodded, then smiled. I may have found your elusive butterfly, a way to convince the Cora to trust us. What if we could show them that we are willing to help them and do not want to take over or plunder their worlds, he asked. The ambassador turned a sharp gaze on him. Be careful with that idea. Even stating the negative can be a problem. It opens up too much, she said. She shifted in her seat and turned to one side. The doctor nodded. I take your point. We don't have any sort of relationship with the Cora. They have no idea who we are. We need to focus on what we can do to help them. Keep it positive, he said. The ambassador nodded and smiled. Yes, go on. Tell me about the butterfly, she said. The doctor smiled. When Beth and I were going through the Cora's main food sources, crops, and historical food supplies, I noticed several plants are very similar to healing plants we have. They can all be quite potent. They could address several of the Cora's most common ailments, including what looks to be a prevalent problem with a disease similar to what we know as malaria. If I'm right, they have a species of tree that can cure it. There's a preparation method and a course of treatment. It isn't too complicated, and it doesn't require much more than what's needed to prepare a meal, he said. The ambassador's eyes got bigger and bigger as he spoke. You've found it. This could be enough all by itself to get the Cora to sign the treaty. Congratulations, she said. She got up, walked over to him, and bro slapped him lightly on his shoulder. Then she hugged his shoulders and kissed his cheek. She stepped back and started pacing the floor. Mark, you've just made my day, my year maybe. This is perfect. Absolutely perfect. I'll be right back. We hosted dinner for the Kalan Council. You work with their doctors and chefs to prepare the treatment, and we include it with the dinner. We record you with their doctors, scientists, chefs, and technology transfer, all that. Excellent PR, by the way. And they keep a copy for their archives. We take clips from that training and put it together with the finished meal. And if we are extra lucky, we sign the treaty before we sit down for dinner. Where's Beth? She opened a comm link. Beth, could you please come to my quarters? I've got something you need to hear, she said. I'll need 5 minutes, Ambassador, Beth replied. Thank you, the ambassador said. She closed the link. She poured the last of the coffee into their cups. I'm going to put on another pot of coffee, she said. That would be super wonderful, fantastic, the doctor said. He grinned, put his elbow on the table, and set his cheek on his hand. He closed his eyes. Mark, did you sleep? The ambassador asked. The doctor opened his eyes and shook his head. No, I didn't find the genetic threads until about 4, and then I triple checked. I still need a sample to be sure, but, he said, this could change everything. You know that better than I do, the ambassador said, finishing his thought. The doctor nodded and grinned. The door chime sounded. A small panel next to the door lit up. Come in, the ambassador said. You wanted to see me, Ambassador, Beth asked. Oh, good morning, doctor. You're up early. Did you sleep? She asked. The doctor laughed. Good morning, Beth. Thank you. No, he said. The ambassador held out a full cup of fresh coffee. Would you like some coffee, Beth? She asked. Beth nodded. She looked down at the cup and smiled. Thank you, Ambassador. We were reviewing the files until later early. I'm not sure which right now, she said. The ambassador picked up her cup, went back to the table, and sat down. She pushed a chair out for Beth. Beth sat down. The ambassador took a sip of coffee and smiled. The doctor tells me he found something that could be the perfect solution for how we approach the Quora and what we can offer them, she said. The doctor grinned playfully. We're going to cook dinner for them, he said. Beth frowned and turned her head to one side. We're what? She asked. The doctor smiled and nodded. We're going to cook dinner for them. Remember how excited I was after you showed me the archives on their foods and plants, he asked. Beth still looked puzzled, but she nodded. That was right before I left. I thought we were going to start again this morning, she said. Yes, well, I wanted to have another look before I said anything. We don't have any samples or a cross-reference, but I'm pretty sure some of those plants we were looking at have medical properties. When properly prepared and used, they can treat and cure several diseases. The Quora seemed to not know this. I didn't see any references in the reports, the doctor said. Beth narrowed her eyes and looked down, shaking her head. Plants can cure? She asked. Sleepiness, the doctor said. He grinned and pointed at her cup. Beth smiled. She set both elbows on the table, put her chin on her hands, and closed her eyes. How late was it when you stopped? The ambassador asked. Maybe around 2. I was making too many mistakes to be useful. I went to rest and clean up, Beth replied. The doctor grinned as if he'd just won an award. I stayed, he said proudly. The ambassador chuckled at his expression. Would you like more coffee, Beth? She asked. The doctor pouted. Yes, she would, and so would I, thank you, he said. He held out his cup. The ambassador grinned. She poured another cup for Beth, then for the doctor, and finally for herself. Beth looked down at the cup on the table and smiled. She stood up and stretched. How are some common plants going to change anything, she thought. She walked to the end of the room. As she turned around, she saw little colored lights coming from a long bag. She reached out both hands and picked up the sword and its sheath, supporting the blade end across one palm and the hilt with the other. Ambassador, this is amazing workmanship. Where does the sword come from? She asked. She started walking back to the table. The sword began to glow faintly. The ambassador looked up at Beth without moving her head. The doctor stood up quickly, his eyes wide with surprise. Beth, put that down, he said. Beth's shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, I didn't mean, she said. She turned to put it back. The ambassador frowned. The doctor is tired and grumpy, she said. She looked at him and shook her head slightly to warn him not to say anything. Then she turned her head to one side. Beth, how does the sword feel in your hand? She asked. Beth's face brightened. She smiled and looked down at the sword. It feels light, as if there's nothing, but I know there is something. It's cool and warm at the same time. It's very comfortable. It has such a fine balance. It fits my hand perfectly, she said. She turned her hand over and closed it around the hilt. The doctor looked at the ambassador. The ambassador looked at him, lowered her eyes, and turned her head ever so slightly from side to side. She looked up and smiled at Beth. That's an old sword from Roz, too. I used to carry it more often. I'm happy you asked about it. If you would put it back now, please, she said. The doctor sat down and looked into his cup. Beth set the sword back on top of the robes and went back to the table. I don't remember seeing an inlay like that in the artifacts catalogs from Roz, too, she said. The ambassador nodded. That pattern is quite rare, she said. She set her elbow on the table and held her chin with her thumb, looking at Beth. Maya, she said, asking for the AI. Maya appeared. Yes, ambassador, she said. Would you set up an archive with background on these carvings for Beth? Let me review it before you give her access. I may want to add a few things, the ambassador said. Of course, ambassador, Maya replied. Thank you, ambassador, Beth said. The ambassador smiled. I'm glad you asked, really. Besides, it's your job, she said. She shrugged and smiled. You're supposed to make yourself an expert on cultures and artifacts. How can you do that if you don't learn more than what you already know, she asked. She got up to get more coffee. Some for me, the doctor asked. He held out his cup. The ambassador poured and put the pot down on the table. She turned to Beth. Now then, back to the plants. If what the doctor thinks might be possible is actually possible, we will be teaching the Cora how to make their own life-saving medications. That could be enough to convince them to sign a treaty, she said. You think that could happen, Beth asked. The ambassador grinned sideways. The doctor has to confirm it, but if it is, then yes. I think they will give us a treaty. We need to be ready. That's why I called you. If something is going to happen, it will happen quickly. We need full documentation of whatever the doctor does, and we need to make sure we have all the appropriate footage for the archives. More than equipment, I need you to bring your talent for framing and being able to capture the scene, she said. Beth looked down, took a breath, and smiled. She looked squarely at the ambassador and sat a little straighter. I'll be ready, ambassador. I'm glad you told me. I should bring 2 more sets of lenses and a few other things, she said. The ambassador nodded. We need to be ready for, cross your fingers, the best of all possible outcomes. A treaty signing right before dinner. Mark, your discovery really does change things in our favor. Both of you have done amazing work, she said. She raised the coffee pot as if in a toast and freshened their cups. This is so nice, Beth said. She brought the cup almost to her nose. The doctor nodded. Fresh brewed, he said. The ambassador poured the last of the coffee into her cup. She took the empty pot back to the side table and activated a comm link. Namani, are you awake? She asked. Not quite, ambassador, Namani replied. I was sleeping in. You said we should rest today, he said. The ambassador chuckled. That I did, but the doctor has just told me he may have found something that could convince the Cora to give us a treaty. So would you arrange a briefing for everyone, including Captain Logan and his team, please, in 1 hour, she asked. Yes, ambassador, Namani replied. What has the doctor come up with this time? Is it something I'm going to be able to put in a report, he asked. Yes, absolutely, the ambassador replied, laughing. We're going to cook dinner for them, she said. Excuse me, Namani asked. The ambassador chuckled. Yes, you heard me correctly. What the doctor has discovered could be perfect, she said. We're going to cook dinner for them. Seriously. What are we serving? Namani asked. The ambassador tried not to laugh. Tree bark. I'll explain in detail at the briefing, she said. Tree bark? Namani whispered. A briefing in 1 hour. Yes, Ambassador, he said firmly. Thank you, the ambassador said. She walked back to the table. She smiled at Beth and the doctor. If this works, we could have a treaty and be headed home early. If only things could go as well with getting the Olmeri to leave, she said. The doctor stood up. I'd like to clean up and get something to eat before the briefing, he said. The ambassador shook her head and laughed. Is your presentation ready? She asked. The doctor shook his head. I didn't know I needed one, he said. The ambassador grinned. You should have eaten before you came to tell me, she said. The doctor shrugged and smiled. I could smell the coffee, he said. Beth was starting to nod off. Beth, the ambassador said quietly. Beth opened her eyes and raised her head. Yes, ambassador, she said. The ambassador smiled gently. We have a briefing to get ready for. You are tired and would much rather sleep. I know this feeling quite well. You won't get used to it, but you will become good friends with it, she said. Beth giggled. You can take a nap after we finish the briefing, the ambassador suggested. Beth squinted and frowned. Take a nap? She asked. That's what I used to promise myself whenever I had to stay awake. After I finish this thing, I'll take a nap, the ambassador said. How did that help you stay awake? Beth asked. It gave me something to look forward to, the ambassador said. She walked Beth to the door. Go get some nuts to snack on so you don't fall asleep in your chair, and we'll meet you in the briefing room, she said. Beth grinned. Thank you, she said. She walked out and the doors closed. The doctor watched Beth leave. He shook his head. Something you weren't expecting? Really? She shouldn't have been able to touch your sword, let alone pick it up, he said. But she did, and it was effortless for her, the ambassador said. The doctor frowned. Aladril should have been too heavy for her to move, let alone pick up. The hilt should have burned her hand, he said. But it wasn't, and it didn't. Aladril recognized her. You saw the glimmer, the ambassador said quietly. The doctor turned his head to one side and looked at the ambassador. He smiled. Beth doesn't know, does she? He asked. The ambassador shook her head. Not yet, she said. How long have you known? The doctor asked. Just now I suspected, but I wasn't sure, the ambassador said. Are you going to tell her? The doctor asked. The ambassador shook her head. You know better. She isn't ready. She hasn't asked, she said. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear, the doctor said. The ambassador nodded. From the second book of the ancients. What I want doesn't matter. I can't teach her anything until she's ready, she said. Then what? The doctor asked. We will help her find out for herself, the ambassador said. Now you really sound like Master Tai, the doctor said. He chuckled a little and dropped his head. The ambassador nudged his shoulder. Let's get you a snack, too. We can't have you falling asleep during your presentation, she said. The doctor laughed and stood up. Could I try that? He asked. The ambassador shook her head. No, she said. She gently pushed him toward the door. The doctor grinned and took her arm. They walked down the hallway together. Dinner preparations. The diplomatic briefing room on the Magellan. Kel and Namani arrived at the same time. The lights in the diplomatic briefing room came on as they entered. Do you know what's going on? Kel asked. He sat down. No, Namani replied. He took a seat across from Kel. She said something about dinner and tree bark, he said. Tree bark? For dinner? Kel asked. He frowned and scratched his head. Namani raised his hands and shook his head. The doctor has come up with something, he said. Kel laughed. Well, there's that, he said. Namani grinned. I'll be right back. Kell shook his head and looked over at the door. Here they come, he said. The ambassador walked in, followed by the doctor, Beth, Captain Logan, Commander Brandon, and Lieutenant Katie. She waited at the front of the room while the others took seats. Thank you for coming on such short notice. The doctor may have a solution that will convince the Kalen Council to agree to a treaty with us, the ambassador said. She nodded to the doctor. The doctor smiled happily, stood up, and walked to the front of the room. He activated a screen to show a collection of samples and preparations. I was reviewing what we know about the Cora's medical history. We don't have much. Of what we do know, they suffer from several diseases similar to those that afflict most of us, including malaria and dysentery, he said. He changed the image to show a small group of trees. These trees look like what we call cinchona. I need a sample to confirm, but it looks like a match, he said. He looked around the room. They were all waiting for him to go on. Lieutenant Katie turned her head sideways and looked at him. The doctor smiled. Cinchona bark contains quinine. Quinine can be used to treat malaria, he said. Commander Brandon frowned. You can make a medicine from tree bark, she asked. Namani sat up and put his hand over his mouth. We don't have to eat it, he whispered to Kell. Kell grinned. At least I'm not the only one questioning the idea of making medicines from trees, Beth whispered to Namani. Namani grinned. The doctor smiled at Commander Brandon. From this tree, yes. I can teach their medical teams how to extract the quinine, prepare, and administer the treatment. They must be careful. There can be side effects. But if they use the quinine to make a simple water-based tonic, they can drink it freely. Even children can drink tonic water, he said. Commander Brandon smiled. The doctor continued. They also appear to have an abundance of what we call chamomile. It can be made into a sedative used to treat muscle spasms, and it can help with wound healing, he said. Commander Brandon turned her head to one side and looked at Captain Logan. It might work, she said. Captain Logan nodded. The ambassador looked around the room. My plan is quite literally invite the council to dinner. We show them what they have, then teach them how to harvest and prepare the treatment. Beth will document the selection, harvesting, preparations, and results. With a little luck, we will earn their trust. We'll have a nice meal, some tonic water, a cup of relaxing chamomile tea, and a signed treaty. All smiles and happy toast to everyone's good health. That would be the perfect outcome, she said. She looked around the room. Captain Logan shook his head. He looked at his officers, at the ambassador, at the doctor, and back at the ambassador. You make it sound easy. Do you really think you can do all that? He asked. The ambassador smiled. I'm going to try. It would put us in the position of a high-value, trusted ally. That's exactly where I'd like to put us, she said. Captain Logan nodded. Yes, it would absolutely do that. Being able to do it. That's the question, isn't it? I don't see how you are going to do it. Don't get me wrong, it would be great if you can do it, but I just don't see how you're going to make it happen, he said. Namani smiled. Sometimes we don't either, Captain. We look for the possible, not for the impossible, he said. The doctor smiled. Small changes can move great weight, he said. The ambassador nodded. We may not get all or even part of what I want. That doesn't matter, she said. What's the point then? Lieutenant Katie asked abruptly. Commander Brandon glared at her. The ambassador looked at Lieutenant Katie and frowned. The point is doing what we can do. If we don't look at what we want, if we don't know what to ask for, if we don't have any idea of what the outcomes we'd like might be, how can we possibly get anything we want? Or stop what we don't want? She asked. Lieutenant Katie bit her lip and nodded. Commander Brandon sat back a little. What about the Olmeri? Are you inviting them to dinner too? She asked. Captain Logan chuckled. The ambassador looked at Captain Logan, turned her head, and raised her eyebrows. Captain Logan nodded. The ambassador smiled. In a way we are, Commander. Kell, would you review what we have planned? She asked. Kel looked at Commander Brandon. Remember all those times I left the ship, flew around, and came back, he asked. Commander Brandon nodded. You were testing the new controls you installed on your ship, Lieutenant Katie said. Kel smiled and shook his head. He touched a control panel to open a 3D model of the Kalan system. Before we leave for the planet, I'm going to seed the asteroid belt with a mix of synthetic magnetite and cobalt. That will create a whole range of false readings for the Olmeri. Actually, their sensors won't be able to read much of anything. If they get too close, the magnetite will, let's say, redirect their navigation systems, he said. Captain Logan grinned. Lieutenant Katie sat forward. Seed the asteroid belt? How are you going to do that? I'm a good pilot, and there's no way that anybody can do that. Navigation systems won't work in there. You'd have to use full manual control. Nobody can do that, she said. Kel blinked twice and dropped his chin. He looked down for a second, then at the ambassador. He took a breath and looked at Captain Logan. Captain Logan looked over at Lieutenant Katie, then at Kel. Kel, Lieutenant Katie has never had the privilege of actually meeting an Aldaran pilot. I'm sure she's only concerned for your safety and meant to ask how you plan to manage it. Isn't that right, Lieutenant? He frowned and looked over at Commander Brandon. Commander Brandon nodded. With that look, Captain Logan had told her that he wanted her to have a conversation with Lieutenant Katie and begin disciplinary action. She looked sharply at Lieutenant Katie with a tight smile that said, I tried to tell you. Lieutenant Katie dropped her shoulders. Yes, sir. That is correct, sir, she said. She sank further into her chair. Captain Logan looked up at Kel. Please accept my apologies for the interruption, he said. Kel nodded to him and went on. Once I have seeded the belt, we want the Olmeri to continue their surveys. We want them to find the cobalt and magnetite, decide this sector isn't worth bothering about, and move on. We hope they get so frustrated when their navigation systems and other instruments don't work properly that they decide to leave. They decide they don't want to come back. After we meet with the Kalan Council, we will rendezvous with you here, or if that's not possible, here, he said. He pointed to the model. You'll be able to keep the Magellan at a safe distance outside the asteroid belt, he said. Captain Logan nodded. We've been through that part several times, he said. What if the Olmeri don't leave? Commander Brandon asked. The ambassador frowned. Yes, well, there's that. We may have to use, shall we say, less than friendly tactics. But before we consider those, we have another surprise for them. Our ultimate goal is to make them want to go away. We don't just want them to go away. We want them to decide they want to go. We don't want to fight them. That would reveal much more than we want them to know about us. So Kel and Namani have come up with another option, she said. Kel nodded and smiled. First, we seed the belt to make them believe they didn't find anything useful. We want to create so many false readings they give up and leave. But what if they don't? He asked. He smiled at Commander Brandon and went on. We will arrange for some presents to find them, he said. Presents that we will arrange for them to find? Captain Logan asked. No, Captain. These presents are going to find the Olmeri, Kel said. He switched the screen to show a ship covered in space barnacles. Presents, he said. Everyone laughed out loud. Kel continued. Our scans found quite a few colonies of these space barnacles, as you call them, on several of the asteroids. This particular species is especially attracted to cobalt, which we are planning to distribute in the asteroid belt. Maya and I have set up the long-range scanners to send an old-style electrical current along the beam. If we need to, we can use the current to magnetize the outer hull of an Olmeri ship. They won't feel it, but the ship will begin attracting the magnetite and cobalt from the asteroid belt. Then, we fire a pulse at the closest group of asteroids so they collide with each other and break up. The Olmeri won't realize we did anything and won't know what's happening until it's too late, he said. Captain Logan frowned. I understand the procedures and what we're doing. I'm still not quite sure how releasing a bunch of space barnacles is going to help us, he said. Hale smiled. Their ship will be covered in magnetite and cobalt. When the asteroids break up, there could be several thousand hungry barnacles looking for dinner and a new home. They like cobalt, he said. Captain Logan laughed and nodded. Their ship won't be able to move, he said. Namani grinned. Beth and the doctor looked at each other and smiled. Lieutenant Katie chuckled. The ambassador looked over at Commander Brandon and smiled. To your earlier question, Commander, yes, we are inviting the Olmeri to dinner, she said. They all laughed. Before you go, the diplomatic briefing room on the Magellan. After the briefing, the ambassador hung back, waiting for the others to leave. She turned out the lights and went to look out the windows. The stars danced as they sped past. The ambassador looked towards the Kalan system and then towards the asteroid belt. She shook her head. Thousands and thousands of moving rocks, all flowing together and all going in different directions. If he misses one turn, one shift, one change, she said. She exhaled, dropped her shoulders, and shook her head. It's going to be dangerous no matter how good he is, she said. Hill noticed and turned back. Ambassador, he asked. He walked up beside her. The ambassador turned to him. Are you ready, she asked. Hill nodded. Don't worry, Ambassador. I can do this. I know you can, the ambassador said quietly. Her face relaxed into a smile. She slowed her breathing. She was going to use the ancient arts to enhance his ability to see what he needed to see. It wouldn't be permanent. It would only last a few hours. But if he needed to see anything more clearly, he would find that he could. She turned towards him. It won't be easy. It will take all your skill, she said. She put her palms together and began rubbing them slightly. Her palms began to give off a subtle golden glow. She took hold of Kel's shoulders and looked straight into his eyes. Her eyes were fierce and unflinching. Keep your eyes open. Trust that you can see what you need to see. Miye wachin niyampelo, miye chinkataoki. I trust you. You will succeed, she said. She wasn't being encouraging or kind. She was telling him, with everything she had, that he was going to succeed. He had to succeed. Her expression of confidence in him now might make all the difference. And honestly, he really was that good. She let go of his shoulders and smiled, but her eyes still shone with a warrior's hardness. Kel stood very still. He bowed his head while she was talking. He raised his head, stood tall, and looked straight at her with the same warrior spirit. Miyehe chinkate oki. Wawanakene kit, I will take care of it. I will protect you, he said. The ambassador nodded with respect. He would have to do whatever he was going to do on his own. The Magellan wouldn't be able to help him inside the belt. See you soon, she said. Kel turned and walked out. The ambassador went back to her quarters. She finished packing, turned off the lights, and sat down on the floor to meditate. It's taken a lot to get us this far, she thought. She closed her eyes and began to regulate her breathing. Keep your eyes open. The flight observation deck on the Magellan. Captain Logan, Commander Brandon, and 3 others were on the flight observation deck looking at an array of control panels. Kel stepped off the transport platform and walked over to them. Good morning, Kel, Captain Logan said. He turned to one side. Good morning, Captain, Kel said. Commander Brandon looked up from the console. Good morning, Kel, she said. Kel nodded to her. Good morning, Commander, he said. Commander Brandon took a step back so Kel could see the panel. We have rechecked all the subroutines that are supposed to work with that new panel you had us install. Everything checks out, but I'm still not sure why you needed another pattern sensor. It took us 2 days to get all the connections working, even with Maya's help, she said. Kel frowned a little. I'll be right back. Kel stepped up to the console where the new panel had just been installed. Thank you for rechecking everything, Commander. This panel is fed by an array of controls I've installed on my cruiser. It will let you know where I am and if there are any Olmeri near me. I may not be able to see them, but with this you can, he said. Commander Brandon's eyes got bigger. She dropped her chin, looked at Captain Logan, then at Kel. You had us install an Aldaran navigation relay, she asked. Kel nodded. You want us to watch your six from here, Commander Brandon said. It wasn't a question, and she didn't need an answer. She knew. Yes, Kel said. Captain, who will be keeping watch, he asked. Captain Logan motioned to the three others to step forward. Sergeant Farrell will monitor your comlinks. Master Sergeant Ray will monitor your systems relays and the new sensors. Master Chief Franklin will be on overwatch. She will be monitoring your flight path and looking for your exit, he said. Kel smiled and looked at a screen. It showed a wide view of the asteroid belt. Thank you, Captain. This won't take long. My timing has to be just right, so I'm in sync with the flow of the asteroids around me, especially as I enter the belt. I don't want to hit anything, and I don't want any of the asteroids to hit me. It's not the big ones I'm worried about, it's the little ones. I've installed additional forward shields that will take most of the impacts, but there are cross currents. I need to keep clear of them or risk getting hit from the side, he said. He wasn't explaining this for Captain Logan, he was reviewing it for himself. Master Sergeant Ray stepped up next to Commander Brandon. Maya has linked with your ship to assist with the entry timing. But once you enter the belt, you will be on your own. We won't be able to keep the connection, he said. That is true, Kel said. He tilted his head slightly to one side. Does he really think I don't know that, he thought. Captain Logan frowned. Master Sergeant? He didn't need to say anything more. He turned to Kel. Is there anything we can do to help you, he asked. Kel shook his head. No, Captain, he said. Good luck then, Captain Logan said. Chief Franklin stepped up to the display panels. Sergeant Farrell took his position at the audio console. Master Sergeant Ray went to stand at the systems relay station. Captain Logan and Commander Brandon stepped back to observe. Kel took a deep breath, nodded to Captain Logan, and walked down the steps to his cruiser. Outwardly, his ship appeared to be just another very nice Galaxy-class Aldaran cruiser. It was quite a bit more. Kel had made a few modifications, mostly hidden, and none of them for comfort. He'd added more modifications to his sensors and navigation systems for this flight. The airlock closed and the hangar door began to open. Follow the bouncing ball. Kel's cruiser, the asteroid belt. Kel flew parallel to the asteroid belt, looking for the patterns of motion. He needed to harmonize his flight speed and direction with the motion of the asteroids so he could fly with them and between them. He sat back in his chair and looked at the displays on his console. Maya appeared and activated an overhead display. The belt changes shape. Once you are inside, you will have to compensate, she said. Yes, thank you for the reminder, Kel said. Try to keep the cobalt and magnetite along the upper center where it's more likely to attract their attention. We want any readings along the edge to appear to come from the center, Maya said. Kel tightened his jaw. Maybe I shouldn't have asked for the reminders, he thought. He looked up. Show map K-19, he said. He'd just seen what he was waiting for, a section that was mostly larger asteroids. A 3D map appeared on a console in front of him. It was oriented to the belt in the same way as the ship. Match trajectory and link, Kel said. The 3D map transformed into an immersive map linked in real time to the sensors on the outside of the ship. It could track asteroids within 5 meters of his ship and show him what they looked like. Kel sat back in his chair and looked at the asteroid belt. The number and variations of asteroids was daunting. He needed to try to follow the variations and patterns to find an opening. There, he thought. Captain, I will be entering the belt momentarily. If all goes well, I'll see you back here in 10 minutes, he said. Captain Logan stepped up to the comlink. Understood, Kel. See you shortly, he said. Kel maneuvered his cruiser into position. He adjusted his speed. He looked at the patterns. He entered the belt. He lost comms. He lost the link with Maya. He lost automated controls. He shifted in his seat. He leaned forward. He took full control of the ship. In half a second, he matched the flow. He began a series of graceful maneuvers, twisting in and out among the asteroids. He rolled over one asteroid and across another, ducking in between the larger ones and coasting deftly around the smaller ones. As he flew, he periodically opened the tanks of cobalt and magnetite. This isn't too bad, he thought. He smiled. He was actually having a good time. It was a challenge riding the floes as they twisted and turned among the rocks. He liked challenges. He had to stay alert, though. He'd been a little slow in pulling out of one of the turns. A small asteroid had clipped the rear. It could have been a problem. Kel finished seating the belt. He started looking for an exit. He cleared two large asteroids. He emerged in a field of smaller asteroids. He turned to get out of the field. An asteroid struck the tail of his ship. The ship went into a spin. He tried to compensate. He was spinning too fast. He couldn't control the spin. He couldn't see the streams. He couldn't see the openings. He sat back in his chair and set his shoulders. He blinked to clear his eyes. Trust that you can see what you need to see, he heard the ambassador say. Kel opened his eyes. Everything seemed to slow down. He could see the stream. He could see the flows clearly, far more clearly than normal even for him. He could see how to harmonize the spin. He pulled in on the controls to spin the ship more. That would let him get control. Fighting it wouldn't help. He touched the wing controls. The inner wings responded. The ship stabilized. He spun into a side stream. He looked for a way out. He banked to catch an outward flow. He cleared the edge. He took a breath and looked around. He was on the other side. I'd rather not have to do that again, he thought. Kel dropped under the belt and headed toward the Magellan. He was a few minutes late getting back to the rendezvous point. He parked his ship in the hangar, opened the door, and walked down the ramp. He stopped to look at his ship. The back tail section would have to be replaced. Between the damage the small asteroids had done and a chunk bent out of shape by the bigger one, the outer panels looked more like Swiss cheese that had been nibbled on than a tail panel. He took a deep breath and shook his head. He turned and walked quickly across the deck. Coda, flight observation deck on the Magellan. Kel walked up the steps to the observation deck. Commander Brandon and Captain Logan were standing off to one side. How did things go? Commander Brandon asked. Kel smiled a half smile. Things went well, Commander. I have seated the belt, he said. He kept walking. Captain, I'll let the ambassador know I've finished. We can leave for Kaylin as soon as she's ready, he said. He stepped onto the transport platform. Captain Logan nodded, frowned a little, and turned to Commander Brandon. What do you make of that, Commander? He said. Commander Brandon shrugged and shook her head. Everything is fine, she asked. I get the feeling he left something out, Captain Logan said. Chief Franklin waved to them. Commander, Captain, there's something you need to see, she said. She pointed to the display in front of her. Captain Logan raised his eyebrows and walked over to where Chief Franklin was standing. Commander Brandon followed. Sergeant Farrell and Master Sergeant Ray stepped back to make room in front of the screen. Chief Franklin stood aside. Maya just finished reprocessing the last segment of Kel's flight. It looked like there was something wrong with the sensors, but everything checks out, she said. She touched the control to start the playback. Commander Brandon looked down, then up, then side to side. Those twists and turns are impressive. He does make that look easy, doesn't he? She asked. She shook her head. Captain Logan leaned in closer to the screen. He shifted back and forth, left and right, as he watched the flight patterns. Kel really is an exceptional pilot, he said with admiration. Chief Franklin shook her head. Give it another second, sir. Coming right here. I have never seen anyone fly a pretzel like that. It's not supposed to be possible, she said. The screen showed Kel executing a series of intricate loops and turns through the asteroids as he recovered from the spin. Commander Brandon's mouth fell open. Did you see that? No, that's not possible. It's just not. No way. Play that back, would you, Chief? She asked. Captain Logan stared at the screen and shook his head. Legendary does not begin. What I thought I knew about the skills of Alderan pilots isn't even close, he said. All packed and ready to go. The ambassador's quarters on the Magellan. The hallway was quiet and empty. Kel arrived at the ambassador's quarters and rang the bell. The ambassador was sitting on the floor. She got up. Come in, she called out. Ambassador, Kel said quietly. The ambassador smiled happily. She bowed to him. Ha, kante suta kante wastea wachi ankelo. Braveheart, I am so happy to see you, she said, relief audible in her voice. Kel smiled at her greeting. He looked down and turned his head to one side. Wanun Yankapi, I saw something, he said. The ambassador smiled gently. Nie esta cabrella. You opened your eyes, she said. Ha, yes, Kel said. He looked down, frowned, and smiled at the same time, then looked up, puzzled. You were there with me, he said. Ha, yes, the ambassador replied. She crossed her arms at her chest, opened them, and bowed again. I am so very happy you are here, she said. Kel made whatever he did seem easy. It wasn't. He was one of the best pilots in the galaxy, and she was so very lucky to have him with her. The comlink chimed and lit up. Ambassador, we have everything loaded. We are ready to leave for Kalen 2. I have spoken with their chief of staff. They will send a delegation to meet us at the landing site. We will have time to see some of their city before our meeting with their high council, Namani said. I'm on my way, thank you, the ambassador said. She turned to Kel and smiled. How was the flight, she asked. Kel smiled. Oechin kitisin, ihan kea kita yasika. Not too difficult. A little bumpy at the end, he said. A little bumpy, the ambassador asked. Kel took a deep breath and nodded. Just a little, he said. The ambassador smiled. For him to say a little bumpy meant it was quite rough. Let's hope the flight to Kalen is smoother, she said. Kel grinned and nodded several times. They walked out into the hallway and turned towards the transport platform. They would be traveling in the ambassador's personal shuttle. She had a few things she kept on the shuttle, small gifts for those she was going to meet, her formal robes and other things. It was easier to pack the shuttle and have it brought on board than it was to try to pack crates and figure out where they had been put. The shuttle was fitted with several recording systems to capture the various diplomatic moments for the archives. And it looked nice in the backgrounds, especially on her first visit to a planet. Beth had a knack for capturing her walking down the ramp from the ship with the Central Alliance insignia and her personal seal in the frame. She did like making an entrance. That's all for tonight. Join us next time when the ambassador and her team leave for Kalen. They meet the Korra and discover there's much more to their new friends than they have been told. You've been listening to a reading of The Ambassador on channel15radio.com. Old time radio for a new era. Good night.